Joining us now, ranking member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, also member of the House Appropriations Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Great to have you back on the show. Thank you very much. So there's some stories about Michael Flynn that aren't sourced out completely. So I'd like to ask the question this way. He was interested in telling his story before. Could he add value, and in what way could he add value to the Bob Mueller investigation, do you think?
He could certainly add value because he had his own interactions with the Russians, and there's, of course, this reported meeting between Kushner and Flynn and the Russian ambassador where allegedly they discussed setting up a secret back channel to communicate with the Russians. He could shed, obviously, a lot of light on that. He could shed light on other interactions that may not be publicly known. And, of course, any discussions with the Russians over a quid pro quo, over sanctions, that would be of deep interest to the special counsel. If he knows anything about the Trump Tower meeting, that would be of deep interest. He, at one point, had asked for immunity in a very public way. And we haven't pursued that. Frankly, we want to make sure that we learn everything we can before we even consider such an extraordinary process.
What are the chances he has nothing to add?
Well, I think the bigger risk than that he has nothing to add, because he clearly could add in terms of what he knows, is can he be believed? Can he be trusted? And he's done enough, said enough, where he's impeached a lot of his own credibility. So you would need, I think, as a special counsel, to be able to corroborate anything he might say as a cooperating witness.
Or he might need to produce documentation or something that corroborates it. Willie?
Has at any point, to your knowledge, General Flynn sought immunity along this process?
Well, you know, he or his attorney made a very public call for immunity early in the investigation. With us, it was never pursued, and perhaps because, frankly, it would have been, I think, rejected, you know, at the early stages and probably even at the later stages. Whether he made that request to Bob Mueller early in the process, we don't know. I think it is significant that they now have opted out of this joint defense agreement. That says to me that this is coming to a critical point where he's either going to face indictment or a plea, and there's an interest, at least, in a negotiated resolution that might include cooperation. That, I think, is a key development, means something is probably close to happening in that case.
You spent a lot of your professional life as a prosecutor. As you've watched this played out, does General Flynn, along the way, has he made the moves, at least, of someone who was taking steps toward cooperating?
You know, certainly not that we have seen publicly. The only step we've seen along those lines is the one we saw just very recently. There's been a lot of speculation because of the seriousness of the potential charges against him and against his son that he has every reason to cooperate. But then at the same time, you saw through the pardoning of Joe Arpaio, the president trying to send a message to Flynn and others, hey, stick with me, don't turn state's evidence on me, and I'll have your back. And I won't even wait until the case is over. The Arpaio case, of course, hadn't even reached sentencing yet. But this, you know, at least gives the appearance that he may indeed be cooperating.
There's another wrinkle in this story. One of President Trump's reported contacts over the holiday weekend at Mar-a-Lago is getting some attention due to ties to Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his investigation. A source told Politico the president had a, quote, lengthy conversation with former CIA Director James Woolsey at the Florida resort. Woolsey was recently interviewed by the special counsel's team about Michael Flynn and an alleged plot to remove a prominent Turkish dissident from the U.S. and send him to Turkey. Woolsey, who advised the Trump campaign and abruptly left the Trump transition team in early January, also served on the board of Michael Flynn's lobbying firm. He has said that he was at a September 2016 meeting with Flynn and Turkish government ministers in which they discussed removing the critic of President Erdogan by, quote, a covert step in the dead of the night to whisk this guy away. A spokesman for Woolsey told NBC News last month the former director had been interviewed by FBI agents working for the special counsel about that meeting, adding that Woolsey and his wife had been in touch with the FBI even before Mueller began overseeing the Bureau's probe. As you read that story, Congressman, what would be the significance of James Woolsey, someone who's been cooperating with Bob Mueller's investigation, having a conversation with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend?
Well, you have to hope, although with this president, you can't really expect any norm to be observed, that they wouldn't be talking about the investigation. You know, the bigger question for me is, what's he doing at Mar-a-Lago? Why is he even there? Did he just decide that's a great place to vacation and I'm going to coincidentally go there when the president is? Or is he still seeking something from the administration that drew him there? So, now there may be a completely innocent explanation for it, but it seems quite odd to me, given his centrality on that very serious allegation that Flynn might have been involved in a conspiracy to kidnap, that he would be showing up at that place and having conversations with the president or others, because, that was the only reported conversation. But if he was there meeting with others that also have an interest in investigation, that would also be concerning.
Or he could be a source of information about the investigation to the President of the United States.
That's certainly true, too.
What would James Woolsey be doing in Mar-a-Lago?
Well, it really is, to me, quite inexplicable.
Former CIA director.
Yeah. I don't know. You have to wonder what business there is still between Mr. Woolsey and the administration or those around the president.
So who is on the roster of upcoming interviews for the committee this final month of the year?
Well, a great many. There's an effort, I think, by the majority to bring in as many as possible to try to wrap things up as soon as possible. And, a sense of urgency is fully appropriate, but when you're bringing people before you get the documents to question them, or you're bringing in multiple people a day and you don't have the time to prepare, then it looks different. It looks like we're just trying to get this over. This week we have Jeff Sessions coming in, and the committee has also publicly now announced this morning that we're bringing Eric Prince in a closed open hearing. Now, that's also interesting because we don't do that with witnesses. They made an exception with Carter Page, I think because they felt Carter Page was going to be exonerating of the White House. It didn't quite work out that way. But is this at the White House request that this is open, or is this at Eric Prince's request? And why are we now departing from best investigative practices? Because by having the transcript released, of course, you allow other people to align their stories. They haven't shared with us any of the thinking or reasoning behind this, but a lot of inexplicable actions in the investigation recently.
A lot of questions here. We'll have to have you back. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you very, very much. Still ahead this morning, Native American groups speak out, as well as many others do, at this unbelievable moment after President Trump revives his derogatory nickname for Senator Elizabeth Warren, this time during an event honoring Navajo war heroes. Morning Joe's back in a moment.